Five people arrested on suspicion of using a fake version of the LeaveHomeSafe app at Immigration Tower. Consular and diplomatic officers in Hong Kong will be subject to tighter quarantine measures on November 12th. And Japan's ruling coalition retains a comfortable majority in general election, despite losing some seats.
Good evening and welcome. The LeaveHomeSafe app became mandatory at most public facilities today, but some people are reluctant to follow the rules.
At least 5 people have been arrested for allegedly using a fake app to avoid tracking, including civil servants. Dong Yao-nie reports.
Defying the new LeaveHomeSafe app mandate by dishonest means being arrested. Today, 5 people, including public officers, are facing the consequences for doing so. One of them is an audit department employee, and 2 others are staff members of the immigration department. The 4 males and 1 female were caught while entering the immigration tower in Wan Chai this morning. They used a fraudulent app to check in at the location instead of the official LeaveHomeSafe app, now mandatory at most public facilities. Staff at the immigration department reported the case to the police. Officers then arrested the 5 on suspicion of using a false instrument. We learned that the arrested used an app called LeaveHomeSafe that comes with an identical logo to the official one. But it does not require QR code scanning. Instead, users can enter the name of their locations as they like. The copycat, rolled out about a year ago, highly resembles the real app in its layout. Still, you can distinguish it from the real one by the smaller font sizes and different positioning of the Leave button. Staff at the immigration department are believed to have received training on identifying the counterfeit app. Elsewhere, mandatory checking in with the LeaveHomeSafe app is being enforced at most public facilities across the city, including public libraries, hospitals, and wet markets. Many elderly, like Madam Chow, are troubled by the new rule. She says even though her son helped her install the app, she still doesn't know how it works. In fact, exemptions apply to residents younger than 12 or those over 65, as well as the disabled. But they need to provide their contact and part of their ID number. Staff will call to verify the phone number. Chief Secretary for Administration John Lee admits it takes time for the public to adjust to the new order.
All we try to do is to ensure that overall we have an effective strategy to do contact tracing and to ensure that we can, at the first instance, be able to catch whoever who may be infected or subject to that risk.
He says authorities will take action against those defying the order, especially civil servants. Dong Yao-nie, TVB News.
Starting on November 12th, consular and diplomatic officers in Hong Kong will be subject to tighter quarantine measures. This comes with the government making extra efforts to keep a lid on imported COVID cases. Essential
cross-border workers, including drivers, air and ship crew members, will still enjoy isolation-free privileges. Jackie Lin has details.
Under current arrangements, 48 categories of workers have been allowed quarantine-free travel. That's about to be drastically whittled down to 8. Among those being stripped of their privileges are consular and diplomatic staff. Instead of self-isolating at home, they will have to be quarantined in hotels after entering the city. But consuls general and representatives at equivalent or higher levels could choose to self-isolate at home.
We actually had 2 cases in which the consular staff, all their family members, were infected. And because the possibility of the Delta virus being so unpredictable and spreading the disease even stronger, we have to do what is necessary.
Those who will still enjoy the exemption include essential cross-border drivers and air crew. That's in addition to cargo ship workers that haven't docked in high-risk regions 21 days before their arrival and government workers traveling in an official capacity. Chief Secretary for Administration John Lee didn't directly respond to questions as to whether Beijing officials, such as those working for the liaison office, would be exempt. He underscored these tightened measures would hopefully facilitate talks on border reopening with the mainland. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Well, the city today reported one new imported case of COVID-19 involving a 56-year-old aircrew member arriving from Saudi Arabia. The man, fully vaccinated with BioNTech jabs, was found to carry the L452R mutant strain.
Meanwhile, the government will soon announce details of the arrangement for COVID booster shots for targeted groups. Caleb Loong reports.
Last week, the scientific committees under the Center for Health Protection recommended that the government offer booster shots to targeted groups of people. Secretary for the Civil Service Patrick Nip, who is in charge of the citywide vaccination scheme, said the government is following up on the recommendation. He's hoping to announce details of the arrangements later this week, adding that booster shots could be offered in mid-November at the earliest. According to the experts' recommendation, the targeted groups include people aged above 60, healthcare workers, those working high-risk jobs, chronic disease patients, and people with weakened immune systems. Nip also said the city still has some 1.7 million doses of the BioNTech vaccine in stock. He urged those who haven't been vaccinated to do so as soon as possible. But those who wish to be inoculated should check on the opening hours of the vaccination centers. Starting from today, the operating hours of the 21 community vaccination centers will be shortened. They will be in service between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and will be closed on Wednesdays. As for weekends, the opening hours will remain from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Caleb Loong, TVB News.
Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida led his ruling Liberal Democratic Party to an unexpectedly strong majority in lower house elections yesterday.
The results solidify Kishida's new leadership and will allow him to ramp up economic stimulus. Fumio Kishida expressed gratitude to the nation today for re-electing his party, pledging to work hard on economic and emissions reforms for his country. I believe the nation expects us to build the future for the country. I will work even harder, he said during a press conference. Kishida's conservative Liberal Democratic Party lost some seats but defied predictions and held on to its single-party majority Sunday. The win solidifies his position as head of the fractious party and gives him a stronger hand in the powerful lower house of parliament. Some had feared Kishida would become another one of Japan's short-term prime ministers. But the election results eased market fears, and analysts say he will be able to put his own stamp on policies and push through legislation ahead of an upper house election next summer. Voters are taking the results in stride. Pretty much as I expected, said this office worker, who did not vote for Kishida's party. He said he thought the LDP would face more impact from its handling of the coronavirus pandemic. I'm not happy about the results. I wonder what the voters were thinking, said this retiree. Kishida's weeks-old government has been grappling with an economy battered by the coronavirus and regional security challenges. He's pledged to double defense spending to 2% of GDP in a bid to deter China's growing regional assertiveness and counter growing military technology in other nations. The Prime Minister, who spoke of personal diplomacy during the campaign, wasted no time in announcing he will leave for Scotland and the COP26 climate summit tomorrow. Japan has set a target of 2050 for becoming carbon neutral, and Kishida believes that despite much public opposition, nuclear energy should remain an option. The G20 summit closed in Rome, and leaders issued a final communiqué calling for meaningful and effective action to limit global warming. But it angered climate activists who said it did little to change the status quo.
U.S. President Joe Biden criticized Russia and China for not doing enough in bringing new proposals to the table on climate. Matthew Bray reports.
Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi, the chair of the G20 summit, hailed the final accord, saying that for the first time all G20 members have agreed on capping apparent global warming at the 1.5 degrees Celsius level.
So, what's the success of this summit? Well, G20 countries committed to keeping the 1.5 target within reach, with a series of immediate actions and medium-term commitments. We've decided to put coal behind us, starting with the international public commitment to eliminate finance for the new unabated coal, all this finance will stop by 2021.
Although the G20 pledged to stop financing coal overseas, they set no timetable for phasing it out at home and watered down wording on another promise to reduce emissions of methane. The work done or not done by diplomats here leaves a huge amount of ground to be covered at the COP26 climate summit. The American president wasn't overly impressed.
Not only Russia, but China basically didn't show up in terms of any commitments to deal with climate change. And there's a reason why people should be disappointed in that. I found it disappointing myself.
The leaders only recognised the key relevance of halting net emissions by or around mid-century. A lack of ambition was cited by some, including Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. In Beijing, President Xi Jinping again addressed the summit via video link. He urged the full implementation of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement. China itself, the world's largest CO2 emitter, has set 2060 as a target for net zero carbon emissions. The final communiqué also included a sentence looking forward to the Beijing Winter Olympics in 2022. Politico reported the US and Canada wanted certain wording removed. A compromise was reached. The climate debate now moves to Glasgow, where 2 days of speeches by leaders will continue before technical negotiators lock horns over the rules. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
World leaders are set to take to the stage at the United Nations COP26 climate conference in the Scottish city of Glasgow.
Hopes are high that a consensus can be achieved on how to further cut global emissions. Daniel Rowell tells us more.
The COP26 conference in Glasgow comes a day after the G20 economies failed to commit to a 2050 deadline for halting net carbon emissions at their summit in Rome. Many of the leaders present in the Italian capital will take to the stage in Scotland today to deliver speeches on the matter. Ahead of COP26, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said an international agreement to take concrete action on tackling climate change must be reached urgently.
The countries most responsible for historic and present-day emissions are not yet doing their fair share of the work. If we are going to prevent COP26 from being a failure, then that must change. And I must be clear that if Glasgow fails, then the whole thing fails.
Johnson is expected to announce the UK will pledge a further £1 billion to climate finance programmes. The aim of these funds is to provide aid to developing countries hard hit by the effects of climate change. US President Joe Biden is set to tell the conference that Washington will aim to slash its greenhouse gas emissions by more than half in the coming decade. President Xi Jinping will also address the conference via a written statement. The COP26, going ahead after a one-year pandemic-related delay, aims to keep a target of capping global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels alive. This goal was initially outlined at COP21 in Paris. In order for this to be achieved, more ambitious pledges need to be secured in Glasgow. Negotiations will start following 48 hours of speeches. Any commitments must be ratified by the end of the event on November 12th. Existing promises to cut emissions would see the planet's average temperature rise by 2.7 degrees Celsius this century. The United Nations claims this would accelerate the destruction that climate change is already causing. This means without drastic action, Earth could be hit by even stronger storms, floods and heat waves. Daniel Rowell, TVB News.
Still ahead on tonight's news. A multi-vehicle pileup in Tai Po leaves 2 dead and 5 injured. Thailand substantially reopens its borders to vaccinated foreign tourists. Welcome back to TVB News. A car crash on Brides Pool Road in Tai Po last night has left 2 drivers dead. 5 others were injured, including a female passenger who remains in critical condition in hospital.
A 23-year-old driver was arrested on suspicion of dangerous driving. Jackie Lin with more.
Police were busy working overnight at the scene of the car crash, combing through the mangled mess from the 4-vehicle pileup. At around 10 p.m. last night, a Lamborghini sports car traveled along Brides Pool Road towards Lok Keng. Near Fong Hang Family Walk, the sports car collided head-on with a private sedan. Another private vehicle following the sedan car failed to brake in time and rear-ended it. The 41-year-old driver of the sports car was certified dead at the scene. A 20-year-old driver injured in the collision was declared dead at hospital. The driver who didn't brake in time was arrested on suspicion of dangerous driving. There was an overturned motorcycle near the wreckage. The driver was thought to have lost control of his motorbike following the car crash on the road. But it's not confirmed yet if the motorcycle was involved in the accident. Police did not rule out the case involved illegal street racing. Police are appealing for witnesses of the crash to contact them at this number. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
5 people pleaded guilty today to charges related to an unauthorized assembly at Victoria Park on June 4th last year. 3 other defendants denied the charges. A total of 26 people were charged in connection with the unauthorized assembly. Before today's court appearance, Lee Chuk-yen, Richard Choi, Leung Yu Chung, Leung Kwan Wai and Wu Chi Wai were admitted to charges against them, such as incitement to knowingly take part in an unauthorized assembly. 3 defendants involved in the case, Jimmy Lai, Gwyneth Ho, and Chow Hang Tung, pleaded not guilty.
Overseas, Thailand substantially reopened its borders to vaccinated foreign tourists today. Fully vaccinated tourists from 63 countries and territories, including China and the U.S., can now fly into Thailand. They must take a COVID test upon arrival and then spend 1 night in a designated hotel while they await the result. If their test is negative, they're free to leave and enjoy their stay. Those from countries outside the list can still enter, but must undergo a lengthy quarantine period and frequent testing. The Thai government hopes the reopening will boost the nation's hard-hit tourism industry. Elsewhere from today, South Korea will scrap all operating hour restrictions on restaurants and cafes. That's in addition to implementing its first so-called vaccine passport for those looking to frequent high-risk venues such as gyms, saunas, and bars. The measures will initially be in place for a month as part of the government's Live with COVID-19 policy. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says she has COVID-19 and is experiencing mild symptoms. Psaki, who is 42, was last in contact with U.S. President Joe Biden on Tuesday at the White House. Aides say Biden, who is tested frequently, last returned a negative test result on Saturday. Biden is at the COP26 World Climate Talks in Scotland after meeting world leaders at the G20 summit in Rome. Psaki had planned to travel with the president but scrapped the trip after learning members of her household had tested positive for COVID-19. She plans to return to work after a 10-day quarantine and following a negative test. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for Money Matters up shortly.
Good night.